Honestly, you don't even have to say much. You just need their names. Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, Linda Evangelista, Cindy Crawford. They changed fashion, they changed culture, and they became household names in the process. Today on the podcast, we're talking about the legacy of the supermodels. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Why don't we get into it with this? Don't even pretend that doesn't take you back. I know it takes you back to a very specific moment, very specific era in fashion. At the height of their careers, Naomi, Cindy, Christy, and Linda were more famous than the designers they were wearing. They started walking runways in the late 80s. More than 30 years later, they're still proving their staying power. They're on the cover of this month's Vogue magazine. And also, there's a new documentary about them called The Supermodels. Today on the show, two people whose lives were shaped by the supermodels. Hanna Ellis is a Canadian model and photographer who has been featured in Vogue. She's in Sault Ste. Marie. And B. Quammie is a regular here on Commotion and has also worked as a model. Hanna, B., welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you.
Nice to be here. Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Listen, B., let me start with you. When do you first remember encountering these mythical figures, these supermodels?
Oh my goodness. It would have been, as maybe like a 9-10-year-old watching fashion television with Jeannie Becker Sunday nights. That was always my pick. We had one TV at home, right? So it was like Sunday after dinner, me and my siblings got to pick one show to watch before bed, and that was always my pick. And it was like I was studying the runway walks to implement at school the next day. And that was my thing for Sunday night. So that's where I was introduced to the magnificence of these women.
B, can I just say, based on everything I know about you, that image totally tracks. The idea that you're like, you know what? I get to pick what's on the TV tonight. And you're like, hey, you know where we're going? We're doing fashion TV. That's what's happening.
It.
I love
that's
that.
That's it.
I love everything about that. Hanna, you were a kid growing up in Sault Ste. Marie when you first discovered them in your mom's old fashion magazines. What do you remember about those images and the people that you imagined them to be?
Oh, well, like you said, it was the vintage 17 magazines, the Elle magazines, the Mary Claire magazines, and just like flipping through those magazines and seeing those iconic faces. And for me, it was just like, okay, immediately jumping to the credit lines, like, okay, who worked on these photographs? Who was the photographers? Who was the designers? Who were the models? And then once you sort of got to know these people or the idea of these people, then it was constantly seeking out more work. And they were mythical. They were mythical women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something about their lore that is just kind of like far transcends their industry. They just sort of became like kind of stars in the sky. This new documentary shows how each were, quote unquote, discovered. Why don't we take a moment to listen to the designer John Galliano, who went on to be the designer for Givenchy and Dior. Let's listen to him now.
I had a studio in East London, and a very good friend of mine had run over and said, you've got to come over, you've got to check this girl out, check this girl out. She's only 14, she's only 15, tap school or whatever. And that's when I first saw Naomi working. I think it was for British Elle. She has presence, grounded. It's like a magnet.
Presence. B, she has presence. Okay, as a black girl, you're starting out in modeling when you were 10. What did Naomi Campbell mean to you?
Oh, Naomi was everything. And Naomi was kind of the girl that I had because, my mom used to talk about Iman. So Iman was like my mom's girl. Yeah. And that was really cool to me to see Iman. But then Naomi was out here and I was like, okay, this is my girl. Mm-hmm. And, just seeing her command the runway she did, command the shoots, I haven't been lucky enough to meet her in person, but that presence that John was speaking about just emanates every time you see her. Mm-hmm. And knowing that we share, Jamaican background, my parents loved anybody that I loved that was Jamaican because they're like, yes, culture. So like Naomi was a win all around, right? Yeah. And just having an idea of being able to relate on a very different level, but being able to relate to some of the experiences that I'm sure she had as the only Black woman or one of very few in that realm, and me feeling the same when I was kind of trying to do my thing. It felt like, all right, I've got a kindred spirit there, even if she has no clue who I am.
Also, I like this point about her being your girl in the sense that like each generation gets one, or each generation gets a figure that gets to define its relationship to fashion. And of course, each generation is going to chafe against whatever figures came from generations before them. Like, oh, no, that's my mom's generation. Like, we got to get our own person, our own generation. So like, the notion that she was yours, that sounds like it was kind of transformative in a way. You know what I mean?
It definitely was. It definitely was. And the thing that's really unique about it is, as a Black girl, you only had one. So it was like Naomi was the one. And then Tyra came through and I was like, okay, Tyra's giving a little something different. But that was the other thing too that I didn't realize was such a problem. I was so glad to see Naomi, and it took me a while to realize, like, wait a minute, I'm really only seeing Naomi. And that was something that kind of added a little bit of context and nuance too. Yeah.
Hanna, something that we see in this documentary is that getting discovered comes with a lot of baggage. I want you to take a listen to this clip. It's when Oprah invites Cindy Crawford onto her show along with her agent.
Straight from DeKalb, Illinois, please welcome Cindy Crawford. Stand up just a moment. Now, this is what I call a bod. Did she have to go through that training period or no?
Well, with Cindy, it was much more psychologically. She was not sure she really wanted to model.
I was like the chattel.
Of mental stability.
Or a child, like be seen and not heard. When you look at it through today's eyes, when Oprah's like, stand up and show me your body, like show us why you're worthy of being here.
Hanna, she said, I was like the chattel. That is Cindy Crawford now. She's reflecting on the time that she was on Oprah when she was just starting out. The man that Oprah is directing her questions to, by the way, is not Cindy. It's the man who founded Elite Modeling Agency and represented all of these women, John Casablancas. How did you feel watching that, Hanna?
Oh, that is just heart-wrenching, honestly. It's so difficult watching these women and how little agency they had in their own careers, and oh my gosh, the agency that they lacked with their own bodies. They were, I think at one point in the documentary, they were being described as like mannequins or clothes hangers. And like, it was just the constant objectification. Like, it really is heart-wrenching. And it's sad too, because you've got these girls, like these literal kids who are growing into themselves while growing into the industry. And it's, that can be detrimental to their body image, their mental health. Like, it's a difficult industry to work in. And it still is a difficult industry to work in. I like to think that women have a lot more agency now going into this industry, but some things have changed and some things haven't.
That notion of objectification is very different from the job that you sign up for. You sign up for the job of showing clothes. You sign up for the job of displaying something beautiful. But then, in effect, you end up being, potentially dehumanized, as sort of Cindy was sort of talking about, the idea of like being treated like chattel. Somebody just sort of commanding you to stand up and show us your body. Were there any moments like that in your career when you were starting out?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Moments where I was, spoken about. Far too many moments that I can think about where I've been spoken about, not spoken to, or even spoken at.
While you were in the room, you mean?
Well, definitely in the room, standing there, arms out, people poking and prodding at my body, saying, okay, wonder if she could lose a little bit here. And I'm already a very, very slim girl, right? So hearing somebody say lose something, I was like, lose what? Like, I'm trying to gain a little something, right? So definitely having those moments, and race also played a role in the dehumanization in a lot of different ways. But one particular incident where I was meeting with an agent, and they were flipping through some photos and saw a photo of me with, they asked me to bring some photos of my family as well. And they saw a photo of me and my father, who's very light skinned, and basically said, so can you do that? And I said, do what? And they said, can you just make sure your skin stays this color, because then you'll be more marketable? And I was like,
God,
how? So you don't want me to go out in the sun? I was just kind of like, how am I supposed to do that and live my life? And then those are the moments when you're like, oh, you're not supposed to live your life. You're just supposed to be this product.
Well, the thing about what B's saying there, Hanna, is that we get introduced to these supermodels, and they have a different level of agency by like sort of the height of their career than most other models do, right? Like a big part of this conversation is that at the height of their careers, right, they were collaborators who held their own. Their opinions mattered to designers, to photographers, and we see that in this documentary, the rise of the supermodel coinciding with this like golden age of fashion photography. You're someone who's a model. You're someone who is also a photographer. What was so special about this era of collaboration, about agency that comes from women like these?
Well, I mean, for me personally, like I find them so inspiring because at the end of their, well, not the end, that was not the right phrasing, but at the point of the career that they're in right now, they have that agency where they can choose who they want to work with and which photographers they want to work with, which designers they want to display. And going into my career, I just sort of told myself, okay, this is what I want to have from the beginning. I don't want to sort of, you know, do what other people want me to do until I can. I'm just going to go into it and do it. I'm going to go in and say, okay, no, I don't want to do that. I do want to do this. Right. And, you know, I think without those women, I don't think we would really be able to do that. And in the industry, like there wasn't a place for that then, but there is a place for that now.
And we're speaking about you're being quite modest here. Like you're someone who made it into British Vogue. Like, come on, Hanna. Do I have to do the bigging up? Deal. I'm happy to. I'm gonna do it. It's a huge deal, but it's fine. This series is about them reflecting on their lives and their legacy as women in their 50s. It is interesting seeing the different ways that they're choosing to age, right? Like there's sort of a variety of approaches to aging there. They had an impact in terms of the way that we understood the power of models back in the 80s and 90s. I think there's also a message here about the power of women in their 50s. What do you think that message is?
Oh, I think that message is so critical. I remember a quote, and you know, I might butcher it a little bit. So Linda Evangelista, if you're listening, please forgive me. But she says something at the end where somebody said to her that beauty is fleeting. And she said, it's not beauty that's fleeting. It's youth that is fleeting. And that's okay, right? Beauty continues. And it's just so interesting to see these women who, for, you know, a particular generation had been upheld as this idea of beauty in their youth, even though a lot of them did not feel beautiful in their hometowns, which was very interesting. And now we get to see them age and see them kind of contend with that in different ways. You know, who gets work done and who maybe hasn't really had any work done, who is settling into different roles in, you know, motherhood or in different career aspirations. And I really think that they are showing that, like Linda said, beauty is not fleeting. Beauty shifts, and we can find new ways to be beautiful as we evolve into the people that we are decades down the road.
We got about a couple of minutes left in this segment, but you know what? One thing that I really absolutely have to squeeze in is this. George Michael, Freedom 90. We can't wrap this conversation without going back to 1990. This is a big moment. This is probably the apex of their stardom, right? They're all in the same music video for George Michael's Freedom 90. Right after they appeared on the cover of British Vogue, if there's a defining image, it's like them strutting, you know, like arm in arm down the catwalk. It really kind of truly felt like a sisterhood of sort. What's the lesson in that, in that moment, in that moment in history? Maybe I'll start with you, Hanna.
Like, that was just such a beautiful, organic moment. Yeah. And I think it might have been Cindy who said in the documentary that, like, they even knew when that was happening, that was a big deal, that was an iconic moment. And for me, just like reflecting on that, like, I think, you know, now it seems like designers and models, everyone's just sort of striving for that viral moment. You know, you see the gimmicks on the runway all the time where they're trying to do something that will sort of propel that designer, propel those models to stardom. But that was just so organic. It was incredible. And it's, you know, it's amazing to look back on that and go, wow, that just happened. That was just all of the, you know, everything sort of colliding at once to that perfect moment. You know, everything just came together.
Speaking of those viral moments, there was that I think it was a designer at New York Fashion Week that were like, they did the goo falling from the sky, and I was like, that's not it. Like, that's not going to come anywhere close to Freedom 90. It. So take me back to Freedom 90. What does that moment mean for you?
Oh my goodness. I think the thing with Freedom 90, like I was pretty young when Freedom 90 actually came out. So I knew of it later on.
Right.
But hearing their stories of, you know, the models recounting how that all came to be, the thing that stuck out with me was, you know, this kind of idea of taking a risk in deciding to be part of the video. For some of the girls, it was like, I don't know how to do lyrics. I don't know how to lip sync. And, you know, this is different. And, and you could imagine that for these women, you know, even though he was an incredible star, but maybe being a video girl might have been seen in a different light for these fashion models. But they took the risk and it paid off immensely. So for me, it was just really inspiring to be like, hey, take a risk. You might have your own Freedom 90.
That is an amazing message to leave it at. B, Hanna, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Of course. It's been a pleasure. Of course. Hanna Ellis is a Canadian model and photographer who has been featured in Vogue. She's in Sault Ste. Marie. B. Quammie is a regular here on Commotion who's also worked as a model. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. You are listening to Commotion. All right, let's go from George Michael to this.
High school confidential. High school confidential.
You know what that is? That is a Canadian classic right there. That is Rough Trade on High School Confidential. Tonight, that band will be a part of a very special event happening at Massey Hall in Toronto. They're among the 13 Canadian rock acts celebrating their entry into Canada's Walk of Fame, alongside April Wine, Loverboy, Trooper, Platinum Blonde, and so many more. It's kind of like your favorite 80s mixtape, but coming to life. I got a chance to speak with Carole Pope and one other inductee who comes from the other end of the rock spectrum. Take a listen to this. I had the instinct to sing Metal Queen to you, but I'm not going to do that. That is from 1984. That's Lee Aaron with Metal Queen. Both Lee and Carole played crucial roles in breaking down barriers for women in the Canadian music industry. Here's my chat with both of them. We started things off with Lee talking about this song that you're hearing right now.
It's lovely that I now get an opportunity to talk about the true narrative of the song. You know, let's be honest, the 80s, it was an era where women were still very sexualized. Was just a different culture back then, and especially within the genre of hard rock. Like when I started out, I was very much treated as, you know, it was conversely, I was treated, you know, with a lot of attention because I was an anomaly and there were no women really doing this. But at the, you know, alternately, I was also treated like a bit of a novelty. So, and this was an era, especially in the video age, where women were, you know, we treated, you know, very much like they were portrayed in the Barbie movie in French maid outfits, serving brewskis to the boys. You know, it was, you know, we were sort of viewed as sex kittens to make the men look more masculine, which was quite ironic since they were all running around in spandex and hairspray and eyeliner as well, right? But so Metal Queen was really constructed as a pushback against all of that sexism. It was supposed to be the ultimate feminist, you know, anthem, you know, matriarchal anthem.
Right.
In a world that was completely patriarchal and dominated by, especially within the genre, again, I have to say, of hard rock, we're very male dominated, and also the industry was very male dominated at that time. unfortunately, because, my video was sandwiched in between, Motley Crue and maybe Wasp, that message might have been lost on 14-year-old boys at the time. But that was certainly the initial inspiration behind that tune. And I have many people nowadays that still, like, I'll be playing shows and I'll see, like, mom and daughter, or grandma, if she started young, grandma, mom, and granddaughter, who's 18 or 19 years old, coming out to a festival going, like, they're embracing this as their song, their anthem, their feminine anthem, which is just a beautiful thing when you can see that somehow you've created a piece of work that transcends generations. Like, it's pretty bizarre, pretty impactful. And yeah.
Carole, while Lee was making waves in the metal scene, your band Rough Trade was turning heads with songs like this one.
If this legacy is ours, we're under corporate control. And the worst atrocities don't faze us at all. What's the furor about the furor? We're just sinking right back into it. Every one of us is a neo-Nazi, living in a state called democracy.
That is Rough Trade with What's the Furor About the Furor. And when you listen to those lyrics, I mean, they are directly relevant today, right? Like the quote, we're under corporate control and the worst atrocities don't faze us at all. That is just as true now as it was when it was written. Carole, can I ask you, what sort of statement did you want to make by putting this band together and having this be the first single that you put out? What were you reacting to at the time?
Well, I mean, I was reacting to the Reagan era because he was the first president who really was a complete slimeball, ignored everybody with AIDS, invented trickle-down economics, which did nothing for the middle class. Yeah, and like it's sadly still relevant today. I mean, although, there's always a sense of humor with Rough Trade songs, but that was politically right on and dark and what was happening and how it was affecting me.
Lee, you were at the center of this hard rock and metal scene that was blowing up in the early 80s. You mentioned it's like this world that is notoriously dominated by men and was for a very long time. What were the biggest barriers that you faced in terms of gaining control of your own narrative at the time?
I always try to be a little delicate talking about this because I certainly don't view myself as any kind of victim of the culture back then. I managed to prevail and do what I wanted to do. And I think probably the biggest battle for me at the time was mostly like in the boardroom, it was a very, and still is, very male dominated industry in terms of the industry side. And, just being able to have my voice taken seriously when we were, in meetings talking about whatever song selection. I mean, I remember being in my manager's office on the Some Girls Do album. This was 6 albums into my career. And him getting a phone call from another manager who managed another young woman and saying, like, who are the songwriters? Who wrote the hit for Lee? And it's like, really? I'm on my 6th album and people don't know I write my own songs yet. So there was this sort of this pervasive idea that if you were cute and you were somewhat successful, especially within that genre, that you were probably, a record company created commodity. And that certainly was not the case for me. But, definitely say the Body Rock album, which was my most successful record in Canada, I was definitely getting more respect from the suits at Attic Records, which was lovely. And wrestling back a bit of control. And that was, Body Rock obviously was the result of that as well.
Carole, it's interesting to hear Lee tell these stories of being like really pressured into presenting a highly sexualized image of herself, because you're also about putting sex up front and center, but it was in entirely different ways, a different kind of sexuality. You were playful with it. You were, it was a different sort of approach to sexuality than trying to employ it to be a pop or rock star at the time. You wore bondage gear. You sang explicitly about lesbian desire at a time when it wasn't necessarily entirely safe to do so. What do you think compelled you to push the envelope like that? And did you ever find yourself in uncomfortable situations because of it?
Well, I mean, I've always been obsessed with sexuality because why? Because why is it such an issue? So,
yeah.
And it should not be an issue. It's like a natural thing.
Like you find the tension over sexuality to itself be of interest to you.
Yeah, exactly. So I was always parodying it. And I think that Rough Trade had issues because we were innovative and we did a lot of things before other people did. Oh, that means the same thing, being redundant right there. But I had issues because I was androgynous and I was sexually threatened, and I wasn't going to fit into this sexy chick mode. And that might have been, we had difficulty getting a good record deal in the States, and our career kind of stalled, and we didn't get tour support when we toured with Bowie, which made me insane. So it was more issues like that.
Any stories come to mind in terms of positions where you felt, like this feels a little bit tense, uncomfortable in this way?
Not really, because I really didn't give a shit about anything. I mean, I've really always been true to myself. And, if people don't get me, I'm like, screw you, moving on.
Rough Trade's Carole Pope and Lee Aaron are among 13 musical acts being inducted into Canada's Walk of Fame. They're going to be celebrating that at a special all-star concert happening tonight at Massey Hall in Toronto. That is it for the show today, but before I go, I just wanted to tell you about a little contest that we're having. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke with a Vancouver author named Alex Kazemi about his debut novel, New Millennium Boys. It's this coming-of-age story that explores the underbelly of Y2K boyhood. We are giving away a copy of New Millennium Boys right now on our Instagram. You can check out Commotion CBC at Commotion CBC for all the details on how you can win that. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. I'll be back tomorrow, and I hope to see you then.